Yeah, I ain't no suit-wearing businessman like you. You know, I'm just a gangster, I suppose, and I want my corners.
Welcome to the Five Corners Podcast. I am Jet Bonifay, and on the other lines, as always, Ace Merluza and Mer Stoyadora. We welcome tonight on the podcast some very special guests with their own perspectives and experiences, as well as thoughts on the groundswell movement for racial equality in our nation. Thank you for being here, Pat Beason, Calvin Souter, and Shaka Cisse. Let's begin with some quick introductions for the audience, where you're from, where you live now, and what you do for a living. Let's start off with Pat. Go ahead, Pat.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me. I'm from Jersey City, New Jersey. I was born in Seattle when my mom was out there for a short moment when I was born, and then back to Jersey City, New Jersey. Currently, I live in Columbia, Maryland, in between Baltimore and D.C., and I'm in video production. I've been basically in video production since college and continuing to do that now.
Glad to have you, brother. Go ahead, Cal.
Well, thanks for having me too. I appreciate y'all. I appreciate y'all putting this podcast together and welcoming us old heads to this discussion. You know, I'm from North New Jersey, born and raised. You know, loving the bricks, always a part of it, always going to be a part of it. Still here now, raising my family here. Got 4 kids now. You know, ranging from 2 to 14. You know, got my own law firm here in the city of Newark, expanding law firm, and we have the unique distinguishment, which, you know, I don't personally think is a great success just yet, but we are the largest minority law firm in the state of New Jersey, which is dope and kind of sad at the same time. There's 10 of us. It's not like it's you know, I needed to build a 50, 60 person law firm to get there. So that's the little tragedy behind it. But, you know, we moving, we grinding.
That's all it is, baby. That's all it is, man.
What's the name of your law firm?
Souter, Shabazz, and Woolridge. We're located in North New Jersey. We represent all the major municipalities in New Jersey, as well as some of the biggest developers building things in the state. So, you know, we're making our little moves, baby steps, trying to climb the ladder.
That's right. All right, Shaka, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Shaka. Again, like everyone said, thanks for having me on the podcast. I was born in Africa, Sierra Leone. Came here when I was 5. So if you might hear the accent a little bit, I say certain words. So if anyone was wondering where I'm from, I grew up in Jersey City, went to prep with most of you guys. I live in Newark now. I do subpoena compliance for a big telecommunications company. If you know me, you know which company it is, but I'm not, you know, I just...
Don't put it out. You don't got to put it out.
We'll just keep that to ourselves for now.
No doubt.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight.
Good. We appreciate it. So, you know, again, we wanted to have you. We had an earlier podcast about, you know, Filipino perspectives on this. We felt that it was very, very important for us to have Black voices on our podcast. We wanted to get it, you know, firsthand understanding of what you guys have gone through. Obviously, that's a poignant piece of what's going on now. So I guess we can start there. What does this Black Lives Matter movement mean to you guys? And maybe we can start off with Pat on that one.
All right, I don't want to be too controversial, but to me, it's beyond a Black Lives Matter movement, right? Black Lives Matter it's been upsetting to me in this regard, just the way people manipulate it and try to make it into all lives matter, all that stuff. It's just so, I miss seeing, like we're on Zoom now, I miss being face to face with people talking about this stuff.
Sure.
Because I really feel like people wouldn't say things face to face that they say online, and online is so powerful now. You know, what's going on right now for me is I feel like in 2 places. It's very painful. It's very, like, it's a horror show right now, what I've seen and what I'm going through right now. And the other part of it is like, yo, man, I've known this my whole life.
Right.
You know? So it's more of, so for me, the only thing that helps me is when I think about results and solutions. And that's where I'm at right now, man. It's hard for me to be emotional. I'm trying to be strategic and really think of, like Cal said, we're old heads. Like, what am I telling my younger people that are looking at me? And what's a real solution that can have impact?
So do you feel like this is different? Do you feel, Ace and I again and Maersk were talking about, this feels a little different. There's more impetus here. It feels like there's more momentum. Are you feeling that same feeling?
So honestly, I love you guys. I've checked the last couple of episodes you've done, and I really appreciate it because it was honest. And we should have had this conversation when we were in high school, Jess.
No doubt.
You know what I'm saying?
Agreed.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Yo, for just to let you know the proximity, like Jethro, you were in front of me for Casey, right? And
That's right. That's right.
Like every day. So we could have gotten into it. And we should have then, but so I'm hopeful, man. I'm endlessly hopeful and optimistic that something can happen, but I don't want fluff. I don't want any catharsis. I want real results. And that's what I'm focused on.
Amen.
You know what's crazy about that, Pat? When we was at prep, I don't know if you remember the Ebony Club was defunct when we first got there. And we bought that back. So we had our episodes during our time in high school where race was addressed, right? Like,
yep.
I remember watching the O.J. Simpson verdict in Father Zardo's office. You know what I'm saying? And Joke was going crazy. Wow. I remember running down the hallways screaming like, you know what I'm saying? The brother got off. You know what I'm saying? He was guilty as hell.
Yeah,
right. But he got off. And I was like, say word. They let a brother get that. You know
but I think that's the big point that's missed. I don't want to cut you off, Cal, but people miss that. They talk about OJ all the time. A lot of people were just reacting like, according to the system, a rich man wants to do something crazy. Usually they get off. Oh, he got off because he was black. Like, not because he was black, but in spite of him being black, he still got off because he was rich. Yep. So that was for me. That was the only thing I celebrated. Like, wow, oh, look at that, and it was almost comical.
Money would solve it for you,
right?
Like money would whitewash your blackness. But even for OJ, right, that shit caught up to him, right? Because
no doubt.
When the money started to dwindle, right, and everybody looked at him like, "Oh, this crazy motherfucker," sorry for the language.
You can do it, man. We're explicit. Don't worry about it.
That's what Joker just turned around and was like, "Yo, that cat," you know what I'm saying? But he just was a broke nigga at that point in time. You know what I'm saying? Like in the grand scheme.
Downward spiral for him. Yeah.
Do you feel like, Cal, that's something that's still going on now? If you're rich enough, if you get to an upper echelon level of your blackness, that you get to enjoy some of the things that, middle, lower class Black Americans won't be able to strive for or get?
To a degree. You know what I'm saying? Like, is money could buy your way out of a lot of things, right? And it puts you in rooms with people and it allows you to break down certain barriers that your poverty would never allow you to be able to do, right? So, when you change from being, in my experience, right? I know a lot of people who I think ultimately 9 out of 10 Black people they see, they look at like, you know what I'm saying, you less than just because you walked in the room and you had a little chocolate to you, you know what I'm saying? But then you walk into that room, right, and you start having a conversation and people go, okay, they're intelligent. Let's see where this go. You know what I'm saying? And oh, their pants not hanging off they butt, right? You start breaking down stereotypes because of your proximity. And then if you could do something for them, oh man, you're a special nigga.
So,
you know what I'm saying? So, then you end up in court and you know what I'm saying? Like for me, it's I went from people looking at me like I was the criminal to all of a sudden it was, oh nah, he's a respected attorney in this courtroom on a regular basis. You know what I'm saying? But it don't change the way they look at the next nigga who come through the door.
So for you, is Black Lives the movement in this point in time? Is this something that was bound to happen, or do you think it was just a confluence of things that kind of built up to where we're at right now?
I don't think it was a confluence of anything. You know what I'm saying? ain't nothing that's happening right now hasn't been happening. Right. The problem is that the entire 8 minutes and 46 seconds was caught on video.
Right.
And one of the most dangerous things out there for people is to have to look at themselves. You know what I'm saying? It's something else when it's so far away from you, right? America is built on lies. Everything we look at, right? Like this media game it's a shell game, right? I'm pretty sure everybody on this podcast right now is pretty well traveled, right?
Yep.
In the United States of America, you look at their news is different. They keep it 100.
Sure.
Right? And our media, right, is regionally based. They show you what they want to show you.
Sure.
And the messaging that comes out from that is what it is, right? Most Americans want to be able to go home and they don't give a damn about what's going on next door, as long as they got, 3 squares, something decent to say they got in the bank or whatever, half a decent car outside, they good. And they don't want nothing to disrupt anything that gets in the way of being able to live the quote unquote American dream.
So Shaka, I'm gonna throw it to you. What do you think about, what Cal is saying? What's different? Why is it that the George Floyd death kind of set this off? Because we've seen it, right? Ahmaud Arbery, we've seen it. What about this in particular kind of, pushed the dominoes down?
Well, to just add to his point, though, before we got on the podcast, we're discussing how this year has been a very different year in terms of like just what people expected out of it. And I think that has played a huge part in not actually the actual Black Lives Movement itself,
right,
but the outside perception of it. A lot of people right now are home. You have to be home, so you're glued to your TV,
right,
you're glued to social media. A lot of people are not working, so more people are able to go out to exercise their freedom of speech, their freedom to protest and things of that nature. So I just think that the unique aspect of what's going on in 2020 right now played a huge, on top of just the situation that happened with George Floyd's death, just the outside aspects of what's going on with coronavirus and the unemployment rates and things of that nature, just created a perfect, I guess, I don't know the word. I don't know if it's just a storm.
Yeah, perfect storm, yeah.
Perfect storm where just everything it's in your face. You can't ignore it. And if you just take the polls like lately compared to 5 years ago in Ferguson, now I think the polls jumped up about 70% more people now agree with the Black Lives Movement because it's in your face. You can't ignore it. I mean, even the people who do the All Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter. So I've spoken to some of them who said, "Look, I didn't realize it was this bad."
Yeah, I mean, for the fact that the NFL now is backtracking on their stance about, oh, you know what, we fucked up there. We should have let you guys quietly protest like Colin Kaepernick. So to your point, yeah, I think what we're seeing now is, like I said, a confluence of those things. And because now you've mobilized, and I'm going to tell you straight up, I see a lot of young people. And going back to Pat's point about us being old heads, right? I'm very surprised. And I have a sister who's a super, I guess it's the Gen Z, I guess, Ace is what you call her right now, right?
Yeah.
She's extremely active when it comes to social justice, so much more so than we were. Mm-hmm. And I think that has a lot to do with the internet and the proliferation of knowledge and, being able to share the injustices. So Pat, going back to you about that, is that something that you're hopeful about, the fact that there's so many more young people involved in this? And is that a harbinger of good things to come? Or do you think that it's going to fade off to the point you're making about, hey, you got to talk with your wallet, you got to talk with your vote?
I think it's a good thing. I think they have a hard task because it's different from when we were their age. I always try to formulate this, and I would love for y'all to chime in. There's censorship these days through an abundance of content. So the truth and real voices are sort of over shouted, right, by a bunch of BS and nonsense that you have to sift through, So I think young people have a hard task to really stay focused on what's important, to actually but I love the energy, and I love that I feel like more people are in the right direction than going this opposite way that we see.
And I think to the point you're making about that, they're also in a unique position when it comes to technology, right?
Yes.
Technology is helping them amplify this message. When we were growing up, you got to go grab a payphone. You know what I mean? Like I got to call you on a landline, or I got to beep you on your beeper for us to meet in a spot.
Or
now it's like
the next day to see what happened the day before.
Exactly. Right. Now it's like you're on Twitter, you're on Facebook, you're on Instagram. I know exactly where you're at. We can all be taking pictures of the same thing. I think that's amplifying that message and allowing it to be an exponential thing, as opposed to, you know, the groundswell would have to be an analog groundswell. I would have to physically go and talk to you and talk to Cal and talk to Shaka and talk to Maersk. I think that's the uniqueness of what we're seeing right now. So I think there's a lot to be learned from what's going on. I'm just hoping that it doesn't fizzle out. Now, what do you guys think about everybody who's kind of trying to drown out this noise by saying, and this goes to you, Cal, because Newark, many people were expecting that Newark was going to have rioting and looting and violence, and it stayed generally peaceful. What do you think about that narrative, and how do you think you create a counter narrative for it, especially for Newark, specifically for Newark, for you?
You know, it's interesting because I'm really close to our mayor here in Newark, and his team, and several other Black mayors in the state of New Jersey, right? So a lot of people, you know, and you'll see Ras Baraka is doing a media tour now on a lot of the issues that are going on. You know, his dad was part and parcel of the violence that occurred 53 years ago, almost to the day of George Floyd's death, right? It was another police situation, and they basically, for all intents and purposes, burnt the city down. And we saw the country, you know, we didn't, because we ain't that, we old here, but we're
not that old, right?
But the country burned in a very similar fashion, but much more violent fashion than what we're seeing today. And, you know, what's interesting about that is, you know, I could tie that into what we was talking about, the youth, right? He would have been, you know, in his early 70s now, right? So he was in his early 20s when that whole thing popped off, right? And you know, technology is cyclical. So at that time, they was living with the greatest technology, and the people before them said we'd had those tools, we would have been able to do something different, right? But so we'll always see a progression, and every revolution has been by the youth, right? It hasn't been by people who kind of, you know, we've acquiesced to the system already, right? We've had to try to figure it out.
We got too much to lose, right?
Yeah, and they're looking at it differently now, right? My 6-year-old daughter, and to the point we're in a very unique time. You know, she's watching CNN every day, right? And when this thing first jumped off, right, she kind of looked at me and was like, "Daddy, I don't understand that people won't like me because of the color of my skin." You know, my kids are mixed. You know what I'm saying? So it's going to be a different message from their mom and me, because their mother didn't experience it the same way, right? And having to have that conversation with my Black son at 5, right? As he's seeing, like, whoa, they're saying boys that look like me are susceptible to being killed for doing nothing but going outside, right? He's like, I don't.
Right, at 5 years old.
Our parents talked about it to us a little bit differently back then, but we didn't see it on TV. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't happening in our faces at that time, right? And we had different issues growing up, right? We 80s babies, right? Crack was king.
That's right.
Right? We was dealing with that across the country, especially in the urban environments that we were growing up in, right? So to see my mayor out there, right, and who, for people who have known him for 20 plus years, you know, he was the rebel rouser before he was the mayor. He was marching down Broad Street, right? You know, I remember when the state took over the schools and implemented their own superintendent, you know, he worked with the kids and shut down Broad and Market, right? Like that was him.
Right.
And he acted in the same manner when this whole thing happened, right? They, you know, one of the local groups was planning to do a rally. They ended up having thousands of people come to the rally, and the mayor said, "Hey, I don't want to steal your thunder, but I'd appreciate it if you let me say some words." You know, because look, we here in North, we on, we 6 years out from, the first civilian review complaint board in the country. You know what I'm saying? That was our mayor here in North, right? We opened our books to the federal government, right, to come in and investigate the police department, right? Our mayor did that, right? He had very public and open fights with the police department for the last 15 years, right? As a councilman, now as mayor, he's publicly over the last 3 budget seasons told the police department he was pulling money from them, right? But yet still, if you look at his, there's a bunch of articles that came out today, as much as he wants to reduce funding to the police departments, because he's for a long time been talking about providing additional services in other areas, he's not a fan of disbanding a police department in a community that is rife with violence, right? So, I think it's an interesting balance, right? And if you can keep your head level and straight, we can help navigate this thing. And unlike generations past, right? Because this isn't the first Black revolution, right? This is our 3rd or 4th, right? So unlike ones in the past, we now have across the country African American mayors, African American congresspeople, African American senators, in both our state governments and as well as in our federal government, right? And those numbers will grow. They'll continue to grow as people continue, as the preps of the world continue to take folks like us in.
That's right. It's reflective of the culture, right? That's what's happening to America. We're becoming more and more of a diaspora, I think. So, I want to touch on that, defund the police, right? Because that's what our president is kind of pivoting on now and using he's weaponizing it against what we're talking about here, right? So, and Pat, you had some fairly strong opinions on this one. What are your thoughts on defunding the police? What is the right avenue? What's the right method, at least from your perspective?
Well, check it out, man. What I try to tell people is I've been jumped. I've been robbed. I lost, it was a friend of a friend, but he got killed. You know what I'm saying? Police have never done anything for me, brother. Never. They've never done anything for me to help me in life, except they've harassed me. They've given me tickets. They beat up my cousin. They handcuffed my cousin, while he's handcuffed, picked him up by his ankles and slammed him on the ground. You know what I'm saying? In front of me, so I try to I say that to say, I don't, it's not like I'm against police, but I just try to let people know, like, what the relationship is. Like, imagine going through life like that.
Sure.
Like, every person you see in the street, I'm like, man, if this person has a problem with me, I can't call police. I'm going to have to deal with them on the street. You know what I mean? Like, I can't,
Yeah.
And that not disassociation, but like that
distrust,
sort of like indifference, like they never helped me in my life. Right. You understand?
Yeah.
And now you see what they're doing across the country. So I understand the idea of defund the police. I think they try to make things like 100% is zero, right? And what I mean is, like, it's like all or nothing. It's like defund the police. Police are going everywhere. It's like, that's not what it's about, man. We take away how much money from schools recently?
Sure.
So it's like, limit what they're doing. And what I try to tell people is, like, what do police make? So if I ask everybody here, what do police make? What do they create? And then I say, what do teachers make? Teachers make graduates. Yeah. They take students and make them graduates. Educated. What do police do? What do police do with students? They take students and make them criminals. That's what they do. I'm just saying that's their function.
No, that's
look at what it is. So I don't want more criminals. I want more graduates. I don't, and I look at things like that. I don't want more people who are mentally ill getting killed. I want more social workers, like, interacting. So yes, defund the police. It's obvious. But I think one key that a lot of people don't understand is that racism is like a moneymaker for some people, and they benefit from it every single day. And I think what I'm trying to think about now is like, racism is a habit for America.
Sure.
Yep.
And how hard is it to break a habit?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's easy to say, oh, I don't have a habit. Oh, it's reverse racism.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But look at me. Everybody look at me. I'll take off my glasses. I'll take off my hat. Look at me. Look at me, man. Look how I look. You know what I'm saying? People, no one ever thinks I'm black.
Right.
Right? People think I'm Puerto Rican. They speak Spanish to me. People think I'm Arabic, whatever. No one thinks I'm black. I've been in America my whole life. You know, I understand racism in a different way than a lot of people. You know, it's funny when I've worked with people and they find out, they have like a realization that I'm African American. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I always love like looking at someone's face and they're like, oh shit, did I say some bullshit?
Yeah, at some point. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's funny, and I'm like not making this up, but I see that in people. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, like, oh man, it's just if racism makes people money, they want to keep it going.
Yeah, it's a system.
And I think people make choices. Like everyone loves we love everyone. Black Lives Matter right now, right? But then when people are pressed up against the reality of like a hard situation, something that's difficult, and their moral character is tested, you know what I'm saying? It's like, will you act this way, and will you like turn a blind eye if you know you're going to benefit from it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, let's take that example of that Central Park Karen, right? She was left-leaning. She identified herself as a left-wing Democrat. But to your point, when push came to shove, that innate, inherent racism bubbled up to the surface.
She fell back on her privilege.
Absolutely. Right, Sha? I mean, it's just, like you said, it's just too easy. It's a crutch for Americans right now to use. It's very easy to use. So from your standpoint, Shaka, what about you? What are your thoughts on defunding the police? You know, how much budget the police currently has? I
think it's all about the branding. So if you do, anyone who does their research knows, you know, you guys have kids. I have nieces and nephews. We see how much money is taken away from schools every year. We see how much money is taken away from aftercare programs, food programs, things of that nature. And there's other, you know, the arts, things like that. The issue is, it's how you come across taking away that money, right? Now, teachers unions are strong, but they're not. No one is as strong as the police unions.
Sure.
And I think the fact that they hold so much weight is why, first of all, it's tough to hold accountability for any type of police, because they pretty much, you know, whenever they have that motto: if attack against one of us is attack against all of us, you know, no matter good cop, bad cop, what have you. I think it's a matter of understanding how, first of all, budgets work with these types of situations and how to attack it from that aspect, right? So, no, when somebody says you're going to defund this, you don't think you're going to get rid of police completely. Like Kat was saying, there's no way you're going to get rid of the police in Newark. Like, that's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous concept. But there's no reason police, for example, I forget what state I think it's California, had a budget of $6 billion, I think, for their police department, which is it's an insane budget.
Right.
And I think California is huge, but then that includes things like, you know, Kevlar, bulletproof vests, and things of that nature. And I think it starts with just, like Pat was saying, what do police do? You know, you call 911 for let's say, for example, my cat is stuck up in the tree. They send the police. Why? You don't need police for that, you know? As soon as having a mental breakdown, I don't need the cops to come down for that.
Sure.
We've made the police like a jack of all trades type of thing.
Swiss Army knife.
Exactly. We don't know what's going on, just send the police down there, you know? And then you have these people who, for all intents and purposes, are trained to do one job, have to now do different jobs, different tasks. And if they're not up to the task, they're going to default to what they know, which unfortunately, a lot of times is, you know, violence or what have you, you know?
Yeah.
So we need to, first of all, clarify what police should be doing, and then how to get them to do those tasks. And then the other things need to be dispersed to other areas, other fields.
Go ahead, Pat. It looks like you have a comment. Go ahead.
Yo, I love it. I love it, Shock. So I think police can do what they can get away with. And I don't want to turn people away like police are bad. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I think police have in their mind, what are all the tools I can use to get out of this situation safe, to get home to my family, right?
Sure.
So like, if you allow chokeholds, I'm gonna use
choke
that.
somebody out.
What I mean?
Yeah.
I think the the George Floyd thing to me was different. I think the dude who did that, man, was like a psycho dude, yo. You know what I'm saying? Like that was like that that's pure evil. You know what I'm saying? It's beyond like, I can understand more a cop being reckless with his weapon and letting shots go. You know what I'm saying? Being afraid, and you could, you can't be a coward if you're in that position of power, but I can understand that. What we've just seen, and I think that's where all the emotion comes from, man. Yo, man, that was like sick.
Yeah,
like
it was callous disregard for life, for human life, right?
It's one of those things, man, like I wish I was there, man. But so just to get back to the point, I'm sorry for jumping in like this, but
no problem.
I feel like they'll take it as far as they can go up to what limit of they'll be penalized.
Sure.
So it's kind of like I walk in the door, I'm like, all right, what's going to lose me my pension? What can I get locked up for? Oh, I could get away with all this? Okay, so I know my gray area of how to move. And I just think there needs to be more oversight, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's too much discretion given to police officers, and the way what's happened over the years and with the unions and everything, and trying to provide protections to the police, who are undoubtedly, in many instances in dangerous situations. They basically have put a shield around them, such that when these horrific things happen, right, the laws that have been put in place to deal with those iffy situations, right? Like, I didn't know if he had a gun or not. So, it was a life or death situation. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Or, the same rules in that situation is what typically would get somebody like him out, right? In this George Floyd matter, right? Because they'll be like, we used the force we believe we needed to use in that instance to subdue him.
Right.
It just so happened to kill him, right?
Right.
The world was outraged with Eric Gardner, right? But I think people saw a struggle. They saw a big guy, right, who clearly could take on a couple of those police officers.
Sure.
And I think a big part of the world was like, that cop struggled and didn't really know what he was doing, and he applied too much pressure because he was a small guy on a really big guy.
Right.
So it don't excuse it, but it gave everybody, I think, something to at least hold on to and be like, these people weren't bad or innately bad. Whereas now you got a guy kneeling on somebody's neck with a smirk on his face and disregarding everything that anybody is saying to him for almost 9 minutes, right? But I did want to chime in on the defunding police piece a little bit more. You got to look at what it is for real, right? Because I think a lot of times as liberals and in the very divisive time right now, when people feel like they got to be all the way to the left or all the way to the right.
Right.
People don't necessarily think with their head straight. So what does history tell us, right? So right now, Camden had a very similar situation as Newark when it came to the lack of violence, when it came to their protests, and the whole defunding police. They were the first police department in the country to be disbanded, right?
Right.
Camden, New Jersey, which was listed at the time as the worst city in the United States of America.
Yeah, the murder capital.
Disbanded.
That's right.
Its police department, right? And then people said things got better. But I'm gonna ask y'all, has anybody ever looked at what expense? Right? So, the schools never got better, right? Crime got a little bit better, but the town lost tens of thousands of people almost immediately, right? So those people who tried to help keep a healthy balance there, who no longer felt safe, abandoned, right?
Sure.
They got the hell up out of there, right?
Yeah.
Like the lifers like me who come back to North will be like, I ain't going nowhere. Those people who are in Camden who renovated brownstones that could be worth millions of dollars one day said, you know what, I can't take this chance.
Right.
But not only did that happen, but what came in place of the police, right? So they defunded the police department and basically turned it over to a company called L3. which is a paramilitary group. Right? They built their headquarters in Camden, New Jersey, off of tax credits that was put in place with the political boss that was down there. So they got almost $1 billion to put people to work. Wow. And what they did was they turned it into a cyber crime test lab.
Yeah,
right.
All the
so
cameras and
the
stuff.
same group of people who was going over to Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq to get the intel to make sure that our military, who we don't know half of what our military has out there. Right. So the people who are driving forces like that in extra heavy forces are the people who now run that aspect of Camden, right? Yes. So it's cameras everywhere.
It's a military state.
It is a military city right now, right? And they say, oh, we got the sheriff's department. But they went in there in the first year that they were running the system in Camden. You know, they used data to go and beat the hell out of people. Right? So people that say Camden got better. And I'm just going to ask you, at what expense? Because if you're still treating Black people like nothing, right? If you continue to strip them of their values and everything else, what do you have? So I think we should have we should sit and really have a discussion. Policing has been around in this country since the very beginning. And we need to have a discussion of who do we really want to be as a country? You know, from a country standpoint, you know, not for nothing, we coming out of infancy and into toddlerhood. We are not a well-established, right?
Yeah,
we ain't 300 years in.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So when every other country is thousands of years old, you know, like, so who do we, and they're all homogenous, right? So it's basically one race in every other country, and we are the great experiment, right? We are the supposed melting pot that never mixed.
Yeah, and you speak to a great point, Cal, and I think this is where I land on it, right? And I made mention of this on the last podcast as well. The cops have to be part of the community. What you talked about with the paramilitary group coming in, that's basically saying, I'm going to decimate your community. That is not the point of policing, to your point. The point of policing is to provide a safe environment for the community to foster and grow, right? So you need to feel like the cops are like firefighters, are like the paramedics, are like your teachers. The problem is, like I mentioned, a lot of the cops, let's use Jersey City, right? We all know Jersey City. A lot of the Jersey City cops that police Jersey City don't live in Jersey City. So they have no compunction when it comes to policing heavy-handedly because it's not their community. They don't have to be accountable to seeing those people's faces every day as they walk their beat, right? I think to me, that's where it needs to start. It needs to start with they need to be woven back into the fabric of the community in order for them to build that value back and that trust that Pat was so, vehemently mentioning. They need to build that trust back with the people that they need to be helping police.
But the sad thing about that is I don't know a town in New Jersey that has that doesn't have residency requirement.
Yeah.
So they're supposed to live there. You know what I'm saying? Like they talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
They're supposed to live there. Well, what they do is they go buy a 3-family.
That's right.
That's right. They become slumlords, right? They take the tax dollars out of the community and head to some suburban community where their kids is set up or whatever, and then they treat another family like shit on a daily basis.
Yeah.
It's crazy the way they get around it, yo. And if we're not gonna have a discussion about all those issues, and I'm not talking about necessarily this conversation right now, I'm just saying, as a country, right? It's interesting that this whole thing is framed under the guise of Black Lives Matter, right? Like a term thrown out there, right? And then people start throwing out the whole all lives matter. And, and Black people look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, all lives do matter, right? I'm looking at you, white guy, and asking you, why the fuck you think mine don't?
Right.
You know,
right.
It's not necessarily like
you're right. No, you're
running around trying to tell people like they don't mean shit. The real question is it's just how it's being framed, right? And the lens in which people decide to look at it.
Yeah.
Like it's like I'm looking at you like, why the fuck do you think I don't matter because I walked in here and I got a little bit of chocolate in me? Like, what the hell is that? Like, what is wrong with you?
Right.
That you see something lesser than with just because I'm darker than you, I bleed like you. Like it's so much of everything in the world that it's not like black people can't talk, right? Like we all innately have one fucking lip. I don't get it. Like what the fuck is wrong with you that you can see something lesser than a human being when you see me, when you interact with me? When I'm walking in the store, how am I automatically a goddamn thief to you? Yeah, that's crazy to me. What the hell is wrong with you?
Let's talk about it. Right? Let's talk about why that is. So, why do you guys think that is? I think the default, my opinion, right? The default state for non-people of color, black people specifically, is that a majority of the crime in the U.S. is committed by black people. That's the prevailing thought in everybody's minds. So to your point, Cal, that's what they're weighing in their brains when you, a full-fledged lawyer, walk into a convenience store with a hoodie, and because it's happened to me, right? I live in a neighborhood. I roll up in sweatpants and Jordans and hoodies, and people they don't look at me as a director of engineering. They look at me like, oh, there's a spick over there, about to steal something in this convenience store.
It's crazy, yo.
Right?
But that's nothing you've done, right?
Correct.
Like, so they can come and they can give me all of that bullshit they want that we commit more crimes, right? We running around killing each other and all this other bullshit, right? But data don't support none of that. So black people kill black people, Puerto Ricans kill Puerto Ricans, Filipinos kill Filipinos. It's a proximity argument, right? Like we're gonna look at it for what it is at its core. You know what I'm saying? More white people are not necessarily going to jail because the system's set up in a way to look at them differently, right? Like that's part of this whole conversation, right? When I can have a Skittles in my pocket and the world think that it's half okay for you to kill me, right? But then a white boy can walk up to the Supreme Court steps with a fucking rocket launcher and you don't see him as a threat. Right. Or a kid can go into a church, pray with people, and kill 9 people at point blank range. That's right. And you want to make sure he get Wendy's before he got to go sit for the weekend. Right. Like, what is wrong with you that you see me as an animal coming into all of that stuff, right? Like, we spend money, right? The economy says is that we are actually going into your store and spending more money than we got.
Right.
Right.
So you actually should want me in your goddamn store. I'm spending more money than the people who look like you.
Right.
Like all day, every day.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like wasting money on cars, wasting money on things that, our consumerism is absolutely ridiculous. Right.
And so American, so capitalistic, and so American.
So why are you looking at me like I'm something lesser than, right? We talk about benefits in this country, right? And benefits gets looked at like this token word by folks on the right to turn around and be like, we're giving black people stuff or whatever. Right. When a vast majority of these benefits go to white people.
Yeah.
You talk about living in inner cities and they talk about the violence in inner cities. You know the violence and the ridiculousness that are happening in trailer parks across America?
Yeah. But again, it goes back to what we're talking about, right? They're not as heavily policed as the black and POC communities across the United States.
Correct.
Right, but they live in amongst themselves, right?
That's right.
The overwhelming number of rapes and stuff in this country don't come at the hands of people of color, right? They come at the hands of the majority in this color. They live amongst them every single day, right? Like they know what's happening and they don't say a word about it in their communities, right? So when the little boy in a neighborhood that everybody knows is a badass little motherfuckers running around stealing shit, right? They just turn around and you're like, oh, he's a kid. He's going through a phase in his life or whatever. But you can see another that white boy link up with a black boy, then all of a sudden that black boy influenced him. No, y'all knew that little boy was bad as hell. all
From
along.
jump. Yeah.
Right? But you looking now all of a sudden you got an excuse to point at something else. Like, I don't think it's not, it's our problem because we're outnumbered to a degree, right? But the internal piece of this has nothing to do with people of color.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I love that sort of like reflective way to look at it. Like, it's on the other person, it's not on me. And I kind of have that conversation. A lot of times people kick like that, want to talk about free speech and freedoms and all that. And I'm like, yeah, you got all these freedoms, but why would you want me to look at you the way I'm looking at you? You know what I'm saying? Like, why do you act this way? And that's why I think it's a habit, man. It's like it's a habit hard to break. It's a horrible habit. And I think one thing we were talking about going into this was like, this white supremacy. It's been pervasive. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And America became a world power, and so that sort of like went all over the world, and it went all over the world with colonization.
Sure.
I still feel like we're dealing with that same thing right now.
Yes, it's the mentality of American colonialism.
And it's difficult because it's like everything got painted white. So even stuff that we need, even stuff that was good for us, even stuff from our own history, now gets seen through this guise of like of white supremacy. Honestly, in America, like that's how I feel. I feel like a lot of people I know want to just they're good with just leaving America. You know what I mean? And I'm like, man, wow, like I built America. You know, like I have a heritage through my family of like people that made this thing happen.
Sure.
And like, why should I give that up just because some people were like, it's on them. Some people were evil. Some people were really messed up, really fucked up people.
I think to go back to Calvin's point earlier about, consumerism, I think that historically is a big factor of how whites perceive blacks and people of color. Because going back to the days of slavery, the poor whites always had that illusion, the American dream of picking themselves up by their bootstraps and making it big, right?
Sure.
But in order to do that, what do you need to do? You need to step on somebody else.
Sure.
Who happens to be that happened to be the slaves or black people. Then they became immigrants that came to this country, so the Irish, the Italians, the Chinese, other Asians. And it's just something that keeps pervading. It adapts as the culture, as the fabric of the country changes, then that situation adapts. Because now in the past, 30 years, it's been more like people from like Arab countries or like people who are Muslims, things of that nature, You want to hold on to a piece of your own American pie, your own American dream. So in order to do that, you need to make sure that somebody else doesn't take that from you.
Right? Yeah.
And it's so at some point, the idea of race then becomes a cultural and a class issue, right?
Sure.
And it all just weaves itself together.
And to that point, right, Shaka, is like Italians have been notorious for being racist against black people.
Yes.
When in and of themselves, they were subjugated by the original white colonials that were here, right? So to your point about, it's just a self-perpetuating thing that's continually going forward. The problem is black people have never been able to rise above that, right? And
even worse than
I don't.
Go ahead, Pat.
I think that black people have been above it and risen above it for a long time. I think that you have two different. See, a lot of times people try to make equal parts on both sides. They say, "Oh, the KKK and the Black Panthers." They try to set these things up against each other. There's no equality with white and black as far as like what has happened in this country. I think black people were here before, like Christopher Columbus. You understand? Black people before slavery really took effect in this country were successful. We're over here. We're established. You know what I mean? I think we have, because we're not taught it, we have a false understanding of history. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like black people have been wildly successful. But when you allow racism to go unchecked, when you allow white supremacist terrorists, let's call it what it is, to like do horrible things, and you don't look at them like you're looking at terrorists in the Middle East. You don't look at it that these people are hunting American citizens. You know what I'm saying? Like that's some real shit. When you allow that to happen, those people who have reached great heights get knocked down. these movements like Black Wall Street, these things that do so well, you know what I'm saying, get extinguished, and there's like no repercussion for it. You know what I'm saying?
I was just sorry, Pat. Like you bring up Black Wall Street, and I try to tell people all the time, man, that the way out of this is to kind of reverse some things that happen that have helped people like me become successful, right? So, if you look from a historical perspective, which is what I tend to, I don't know if it's my legal background, but I was always kind of a history guy. But if you look at American history through the lens of how Black people have been able to prosper in spite of throughout the generations, and then the systematic tools put in place to ensure, right, that the easily identifiable race was continuously put down. You see some unbelievable successes in all of that, right? So during Reconstruction, when you turned around and you have Black communities throughout America that thrive, man. Like, that's where our first Black doctors and lawyers, the engineers, right? Like, there's no order on the streets without Black people. You know what I'm saying? Like, those lights that were originally meant for Black communities, right? There's so many examples of situations like that, and then the system throwing you a curveball to mess with it, right? The talented 10th came out of, the realization that in every group of people, you just have people who are going to thrive more.
Right.
Some people are innately going to be smarter at certain things, right? They've turned that around and turned it into, we all learn differently. We all have something extra special in us or whatever. But like, it is what it is, right? Like, we all know a dumb motherfucker was just a dumb motherfucker. Like, it's just like, why? It wasn't nothing that came out the womb that way.
Yo, hold up, Marisk. I'm not gonna say nothing about Hudson Catholic and versus right now. I'm gonna let that one ride. Shout out to all my Hudson Catholic fam. I love y'all, man.
No, but I'm saying, so think about it, right? We were prospering, right? We built historically Black colleges and universities during that time, right? We said, you know what? Y'all don't want to let us get in y'all game none. So we gonna figure out your game, right? We figured out how to get people into some of their schools, right? So it was a trickle effect. So we talk about the big cases, right? But people forget, like, the people who was fighting those cases were educated in their schools, right? Like, so they took that education, came back to our community, helped make our community stronger. And when they started to see the bubble effect of that, right, we got affirmative action. And the only thing that affirmative action was meant to do in the very beginning was to strip the Black community of its talented 10th, right? And it created a divide in our own community, right? So, my whole life, right, being a kid from North, the Black kids who grew up in West Orange looked at us like we wasn't shit, right? They don't have projects up there, right? But we do, right? It's people of color in West Orange that are in much worse situations than people in North, but there became this perception that because we were still down the hill, there was something wrong with us, right? And because we didn't have the resources to put together cotillions and all that other shit, we was just, we were the bad Black people as a result of a couple of people being able to make it and being told, you good enough to come over here into this community now. Like, you don't want to be with your people. Come on now. They all dumb. You a smart one. You different from the rest of them, right? And they created this schism in our community, right, where we started looking at each other kind of funny, right? Like, and we were trying to figure out just how to survive. So then what happened to the historically Black colleges? Morehouse and Spelman would compete and beat Harvard's ass in 9 out of 10 academic events all day, every day. And when it started happening on a regular basis, they said, how do we water down these kids going into Morehouse? So now 80% of the kids who get into Morehouse, 80% of the kids who get into Spelman also get into Harvard, Yale, Columbia, and everywhere else, right? And then you left with a decision to make. Do I go and stick with my people and make my people stronger, or do I go into the greater, wide open, whatever, where the chances of survival going back to the economy are much greater.
Yep.
That's sort of like a brain drain of sorts.
That's exactly what it was, right? So that was the first wave, right? And the college that I went to had a very unique story on the whole situation, right? Martin Luther King gets killed. A priest who I became very close to when I was in college, because he was really a good dude, got in his car, drove around the country, and found 15 of the most highly educated African-American men that he could find, who ended up becoming Supreme Court justices, the first name partners in some of the biggest law firms in the world, right? The first African-Americans on different boards, right? This was an unbelievable group of people, right? And then they all got passes. Because the last thing they wanted them to do once they got that education was go home. And they continued the cycle of that for a couple of decades. You know what I'm saying? And then then they had to figure out how to, like, damn, them smart ones is really smart. Like they real smart, and they going out there and they're making unbelievable change. And they might not move back to their community, but they was dealing with them sending money back to our communities. So then they said, how do we water this down more? Then affirmative action went from, having a conversation about who were equally yoked, and then choosing the black guy over those who were equally yoked, right? Which really meant the black guy had to be a little bit better than that white guy. So and then they use affirmative action as the excuse to put that person in there. But then what happened is they turned it from that meaningful getting in, so that when they saw us show up wherever we were, people would know that we belonged there and probably were going to excel, which was creating an issue for their own looking at themselves and being like, oh, I thought them niggas was messed up, but now they're coming in here and excelling. We became a quota and they watered it down. Mm-hmm. Right? Then all of a sudden you did have that dumb nigga someplace where he wasn't supposed to be. And then that justified the rest of them leaving and being like, yeah, maybe some of y'all, but not all of y'all. Because I was up there with, we had 5 of them on our campus, and only 1 out of that 5 was like really smart. The other 4 motherfuckers was something else. Yep. I don't really know how they got there. And it watered down that conversation. And it gave white people an excuse to look at us and be like, oh, only reason my cousin not here because of you. My cousin should have been here. And they not here, so now you keep a schism going.
Yep.
Right? Like, so in my mind, until we get back together, right? Every other community, if you look at how they've been able to progress and get out of the shadows, is by being together and creating their own economic growth, right? Whether it's the Jews, whether it's the Italians, whether it's the Irish or whatever, you see that they had to go in their own corner, park themselves, create their own institutions of wealth, and then all of a sudden, the larger group was like, well, I guess we don't really have a choice no more, right? Because from an economic standpoint, they doing everything they got to do, and we can't really be mad at them no more.
Yep.
Right? We can't push them to the side no more because, you know what? They'll build a school next door that'll be better than our school. We really don't want that to happen, right? So how do we figure that whole thing out? Whereas in the black community, they just pulled the people out who would have built the schools. Wow. Right? They was like, yo, come over here. Wow. And then they continue to come into our community, right? Like, I got a young lady who works for me. She works very hard. Her children are very smart. Her daughter's going to high school next year. She's going to high school in bumfuck Massachusetts, right? To a $90,000 a year school on a free ride. You know what I'm saying? Right. And I'm like, yo, the girl group, I give her credit, right? She was raised the little girl was raised in the projects. She is a smart cookie. You think she coming back to North? Think about it. She gonna go up there and her roommate gonna have a jet.
So Cal, is that a byproduct of trying to align yourself, to your point, with a more financially viable white culture? Is that ultimately what you're saying is the problem?
I don't think it's aligning ourselves with the white culture, right? I think it's building ourselves, right? And putting ourselves in a position where we look at it and say, I don't care about your school. I really don't, because my kid is going to be educated. right? Like I'm going to make sure my kid has everything that your kid has. So yeah, go buy your kid a Chromebook because my kid got a Chromebook too. Right. I think only when you get to that, when you figure out how to get to there, which they've done a great job of figuring out how to keep us from getting there, is when you get this whole thing figured out. And I've talked to mayors about it, right? Like a lot of people, when you study these economies and how things work and stuff, right? You go to these municipalities. North New Jersey's got the largest budget in the state of New Jersey, right? So if you want to build Black wealth, that large economic engine should be investing in service providers that look like the people who they're servicing.
Sure.
Right? The scary thing is that law firms, right? Like I was like, law firms have done a masterful job in going to get people like me. I worked at one of the biggest law firms in the world for 6 years, right? And they would take me into meetings. I was bringing in I brought Hessen as a client, Exxon as a client, United as a client, PSE&G as a client, and I was taking home a fucking paycheck. And they was making stupid millions of dollars. Now I was doing good, right? I was making more money than I ever thought I'd make in my life. But at the same time, I was like, they can't walk into the room without me.
Right.
Like they literally could not walk into the room without me.
Yeah.
Yet I'm taking home a paycheck and they're buying entire cul-de-sacs in Rumson, New Jersey.
Sure.
What's wrong with that?
There's
and I'm looking at my mayor saying like, so you don't believe that I could provide you with the same type of services on my own as I was when I had this white guy standing behind me? Like, come on, man. Tell me if that's how you really feel. Or help build an institution, right? That we can help circulate dollars within our community, right? When I talk to Black architects and engineers, because that's the space I'm in, right? So if I'm in doing jobs or whatever, I pick up and I'm like, yo, you need somebody local. You know, I got this African engineer, right? He got 15 people on the staff. He could do it or whatever. It's like, oh, he hasn't built X, Y, and Z. Yo, he ain't never going to build no shit if don't nobody ever give him a chance to build some shit. Give him a shot. He going to do it for cheaper so that he can put it on his CV.
Right.
And maybe get another one sometime. You know what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden you see this movement happening, right? You see money being able to circulate. We're not looking for these big corporations to deal with our little leagues anymore. We can help make sure that our little leagues are well funded and our kids got nice uniforms and all the other stuff because we could pay for it ourselves. Right. And we circulate in our own money. Like, to me, the biggest downfall, right? I look at a very pivotal moment in United States history as a failure that most people see as a success, right? And people have looked at me and said this is controversial, but I think the Montgomery bus boycott was a fucking failure. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think that it was a failure, right, is because we missed the economic opportunity that we had in that moment. Mm. We didn't realize that when Black people got off the bus, there was no bus company.
Right. They should have made a bus company.
Drive your own bus.
We need our own bus.
Right.
Yep.
The taxi companies. We need our own taxis.
Right.
Right. The only reason they gave in any was so that their businesses could be back up and running.
Yeah, no doubt. That's
right. So had we turned that into, we taking over the bus company. Right. Think of the wealth that would have created in our community.
Sure.
The jobs that it would have created in our community. We was riding the bus while we couldn't drive the bus.
Right. Or own the bus, right?
Yep.
Right. But if we own the bus, the likelihood of us driving the bus, right? The likelihood of us patronizing the bus just goes up more.
That's right.
Right? You come into our neighborhoods, we all need stores. Right. So in the Black neighborhood, it's the bodegas or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
You rarely see a Black owned small supermarket or grocery provider in the Black community.
So Cal, is that a problem of the system though? I mean, we talked about redlining on the last podcast. Is that still?
I think it's very much so a product of the system, right? Like, if you don't have access to capital to be able to do a lot of these things, right? Because to get in a position to buy a bus, right? The insurances and everything, just buying a bus, right? You need to have enough capital to get some people. You need some ridership for a couple of months, right? So you need somebody to financially back you, right? So there's a book out there called The Color of Money that talks about the banks, right? It's a movie out there right now. I can't think of the name of it, but a real estate investor, right? They used a white guy to go around buying homes, and then they were the first black people to own banks in this country. And then they went to prison because of it. Right. So if you don't have access to capital, which we're now getting a little bit more access to capital, like that's a big problem, right? Like I can use my house as an example. I literally, when I went to buy my house, Bank of America would not give me, and because of where I worked, I was considered a beyond the VIP customer, right? Like my firm banked with them, had our major accounts there, and they basically told us when we started working there, whatever you want to buy, Bank of America will finance, right? So then I went to go buy my house, and Bank of America was like, "Oh, you buying a house in North?" Like,
wow.
Like, why would you want to buy a big house in Newark? Like, what the hell is wrong with you? We're not loaning you the money, right?
Really?
So I went through 6.5 months of going back and forth with the bank to get a loan on my house and dealing with the appraisers and all that other good stuff, right? And then I had a meeting. I was still at the big law firm. I had a meeting where I was a part of a group called Leadership New Jersey, and they asked me to help them with recruiting and stuff. One of the people they were recruiting, the North American head for Bank of America, was living in New Jersey at the time. They wanted him to do it, so he came to my office for this presentation. And, I don't really care what your position is when I meet you. We all bleed is the way we breathe and we bleed, right?
Sure.
He, after the meeting was over, he was like, "Yo, can I talk to you for a minute to get a little bit more information on this? I'd love to get, Bank of America in this pipeline or whatever." I was like, "You know what? I'm not messing with you, Bank of America people. I won't give me a loan for this house that I want to buy." But I was just being funny.
Right.
And he looked at me strange, right? And I looked at him, was like, "Well," I was like, no, like we can, he was like, "What do you mean we won't give you a loan?" I got it. He left the office 5 minutes later. His assistant called me and told me I was closing on Friday.
Wow.
On some real shit.
Wow.
I closed that Friday. Like, there was no more red tape. There was nothing. That dude left the office, got on the phone with his assistant. His assistant called me and told me, "You want to close on Friday? You good. We was closing on Friday." I called the loan officer who I had been dealing with or whatever. Right after I got off the phone with that woman, I called her. She was like, "I don't know who you know, but I'm not your loan officer no more. Call the people who you talk to." Hung up on me because she was mad as hell.
Sure.
And I closed on Friday.
So is it safe to say that you are in the top 1 percentile of people that would probably get a loan from Bank of America for a home in Newark? I mean, that's obviously not typical, right?
Newark has changed.
Newark is changing, yeah.
Newark has changed since then. I bought my house at the bottom of the real estate market, so it was some real truth behind a lot of what was going on at that time with home values and all that other good stuff.
Sure.
But since then, Newark has been, the last 5 years has been one of the top real estate markets in the country.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I got people who living in my neighborhood now. A woman moved around the corner from me. She was living in Baskin Ridge. And, she moved into a 4,000 square foot home in Newark and said she was downsizing.
My bad. I can vouch for that, though, because we went to downtown Newark for a dinner, I think, over the winter holiday, and it had changed from when I went to school. So I went to Rutgers, Newark, and I graduated from there. And just looking around, I think we drove around the neighborhood for a little bit, and it's like everything's changed.
Yeah.
It's crazy, yo.
For the good,
Once they built the arena, all the businesses started coming back.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the arena was good for the city. When they got the Haynes building built,
that's right.
And corporate dollars mean a lot.
Yeah,
because they built the Prudential Towers downtown North, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was $500 million of free money for Prudential, right? So it wasn't like, you talk about corporate giveaways, bro.
Wow.
So one of the biggest companies on planet Earth was able to build a new headquarters downtown Newark, and it did not cost them 1 red cent.
Wow.
Now, it was a beautiful economic driver, though.
Sure.
Right? We building new buildings downtown, right? When I was growing up in Newark, you had dust barrels going down Broad Street after 5 o'clock, because once people left work,
It was a lot, yeah.
Right. That's right.
Now you got 90-pound white girls, walking 4-pound dogs down Broad Street at 11 o'clock at night. It's crazy, right?
Something I definitely didn't see when I went to school.
It's crazy, man. But that brings up gentrification, right?
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
in my space, I deal with that a lot, talking to people as I go in the neighborhoods and tell people we're gonna put a new building on what was an empty lot forever. And one of the saddest things that I've seen is that we haven't bought our own communities, right? Like we've allowed our communities to be impoverished. We haven't reinvested in ourselves, right? And that, to me, is an epic failure that we have to look inward on. Like I said, the access to capital, and there's a lot of things that kept a lot of dreamers away from it, but we all ain't been broke forever.
Yeah.
Right. So, it's a lot more that I think we can do on our end to just put behind, like, me personally, like, I look at a lot of folks and I'm like, you can look at me like I'm less than, right? Like, but unfortunately, you allowed me to sit into too many of your classrooms to understand that, most of y'all ain't shit. So I'm good, and I can feel very comfortable in that space. So I don't spend too much time on how you're going to treat me, right? But I also know the rules to the shit, right? Like, I know I can't go around, on some old crazy stuff. Right. But I do know that I can create wealth for my family. I do know that I am doing things that are changing my community in a way that helps me make money, quite frankly. Right. So I just look at other people and I'll be like, yo, let's just do this. Right. Like, Baltimore got 17,000 vacant and abandoned properties, yo. 17,000, yo. Complete square blocks. Like, crazy, man. And you can buy them for $1. We don't buy them. I know we got $1. I know it.
Pat, let's go. Let's go, Pat.
I don't know if they're doing the $1 anymore right now, but man, you drive around Baltimore, they have like trees in the middle of some of these like row houses. Like, literally, the whole thing's like half decimated. There's a tree growing in the middle. But yeah, I'm with you, man. For me personally, man, and I'm sure you guys same way, but like, I think about places that I loved in Jersey City that it was like, yo, man, I could have purchased that.
Right.
That
whole block on Grand Street, man.
No, that brownstone I walk by every day. Like, I could have grabbed one of those, and now it's just crazy. And man, so I kick myself every day on that. But I think economics is a big deal, and to bring it back to, I guess, the topic of tonight. Everything matters. Everything adds up. You know what I mean? And, man, I wish I could have done more, like, for Jersey City. I feel bad being away from it, but I think every little bit we can do helps. Shit, man, I don't know. It's been a rough week for me, man. It's been a rough month.
Jersey City doing all right these days, yo.
Yeah, don't worry.
Nah, it's a different city, man. It's a different city, man.
Downtown is.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's crazy going back, man, and just seeing it new and brand new every couple of years I get back there. It's crazy.
So how do we go from here? What do we do? What happens now, guys?
I want solutions, man. I've heard a couple good things, like no quotas for cops. Like, all right, don't defund police, but no quotas, no arrest quotas, no ticket quotas, no nothing like that. Like, don't feel like you have to create, crime. I mean, literally. But I want solutions, man. I want real stuff. I don't want people protesting in the middle of COVID, and I'm thankful for everyone who went out there. I didn't, you know what I'm saying? Both my sons, They have asthma. They can't deal with it. You know what I mean? So, but I just want us to be a little smarter, man. I mean, it's the census year. Did everyone sign up for the census? Like, how are we being counted on that? You know? I've always, like, my people have always been called a minority, but so it makes me like, I want the count. I want to know what it's about. Because when we were younger, we were all told that white people were going to be a minority. What year? Do you guys remember this? I felt like I learned this in like 8th grade or something, but they were like, yeah, the country's changing. And you know what I'm saying? By 2040.
It was this year. I think it was 2020, to be perfectly honest with you.
Right. It's crazy. And I think that started a lot of issues with people who are these fringe people who are disconnected from any type of like diversity, you know, in different parts of this country that saw that for whatever reason as a threat, you know? So I try to step back from the situation and see like what's going on, what we're all living right now, and remember things that are important. Like, man, if you believe the system works and you can work the system, then the census is important, man, you know? And I did a lot, it's crazy. I did a lot of videos for the census here in DC, and I would sit in on all their meetings where they would have like 50 different people representing people. You know, they had a girl from Hawaii. They had, you know, a woman from DC, a Black woman. They had people from Alaska. You know what I'm saying? All chiming in on who gets counted, you know, and like how that affects everything, you know. I feel hopeful, fellas, because I think that goodwill win out. But man, I feel like a lot of these people are like, don't take them for granted. Don't underestimate them, man, because they got good strategies. They're cunning. They act stupid, but they really are smart in going about, you know, some things that are just really just disrupting our society, man. But I think that disruption, people gain off of it, and that's, to me, that's what it comes down to, the dollars of it, you know? And unfortunately, I think a lot of people look at it that the only way for them to be successful is to cut other people down, you know? And, you know, it's been a long road in America for Black people. But I just feel like this country is ours completely. I think that we've done everything for this country. And I think in spite of a lot of obstacles. So, man, I feel like I always say this, I say America is mine, you know, and I take responsibility from it, and I always want to make it better. And man, I can't understand why it seems like there's so many people that want to like hold us back from being a more perfect union, you know, where everyone has a place on the table. You know, if we're a capitalistic system, we should not want to like just destroy people and just like crush them. We should want to have a thriving consumer base for our economy. We want a good middle class. You know what I'm saying? So all this stuff could work. So it's been a rough, stressful the last couple of months, man. I'm just hoping it'll get better.
I mean, obviously, it's going to be it's a very multi-layered question, but I think there are two places we can start. First is back to the police situation, right? So, you know, what I don't know if you want to call it defunding or what have you, but I think it's just a matter of we have to find ways to hold them accountable, hold the police units accountable, the individual police accountable, and just the system itself, you know? Because a lot of times it's a pipeline. It starts with the police, the DA, to the judges, you know? A lot of times they work in cahoots to either, you know, people get streamlined, people get, you know, you take a plea sometimes, you don't know what you're taking a plea for because you don't have a lawyer with you or you don't understand the law, right? And then you end up taking a bid for something that could have been maybe a misdemeanor or what have you, and it becomes a larger crime because you're just another piece in this another cog, right? So just a matter of, you know, just holding people accountable. But then the issue is, how do we do that? I think where we've messed up as a society, and this is on all of us, is just we don't take civics in this country seriously anymore, right? So you're younger, you know, first grade, second grade, third grade, you learn about you vote every 4 years for this, for that, for this, for that, right? And then it's gone. You start taking social studies and you move into history, but then we never emphasize the importance of the vote, right? You're not gonna always, your guy's not gonna always win, but when you vote and you take it seriously, and I'm not talking about like just for the president, I'm talking about like on the state level and the city level, even board of education, you know? A lot of people, and I get it, you know, you have to work, you have to take care of your kids, that stuff does come first, right? But a lot of times I'll talk to, I have nieces and nephews, I'll talk to people who won't even know, like, the superintendent for their kid's school, you know, won't even know her name.
Right.
You know, and that all that matters, because it's a matter of just holding people accountable. Why does my kid not get this? Why does my kid not know this? You know, I think if we find a way to, and this goes back to defending schools and defending education, right? Because let's be honest, sometimes people don't want you to learn certain things, right? They don't want you to know what happened in the past. They don't want you to know how to hold them accountable, because then they can get away with certain things, get away with doing what they need to do to get by, right? So I think if we, I mean, this is not something that's going to happen right away, but it's systematic, right? We start young, and you keep people invested, you keep people in interest, you keep them interested. A lot of young people, going back to the Black Lives Matter movement, yeah. So let's say this thing goes away in a month, right? Then what happens now? You know, do laws get enacted? Do we follow up on them? Who do we hold accountable to make sure that these laws that have been introduced in the past few days actually become laws, actually become, you know, enacted, and actually get held, actually get enforced, right?
Sure.
When Barack won in 2008, what I saw was a lot of young people were excited, right? Because it's easy to get excited when somebody's campaigning for a position. It's easy to get excited when it's time to go vote. But then when you realize how actual legislation works, and that it's very boring, it's a lot of numbers and stats and facts, you get disinterested, right? And then you say, well, the system doesn't work. Why doesn't the system work? Because we stopped caring about the system. People only care about elections every 4 years when it's time to vote for the president. But literally every year, every November, there's an election for something. It could be city council, it could be, you know, your local comptroller, what have you. I just think it compared to other countries, we just stopped being engaged. And this is where I think everything just started to fall apart. This is just my humble opinion. So I think if we can somehow find a way to take the concept of the civic duty for each individual citizen and keep them engaged year round, in and out, that holds politicians accountable. You don't do what we need to do, we kick you out. You know, give somebody else a chance to come in and have their shot at it. And the same thing with the cop, just hold them accountable. It's tough. I mean, these answers are not like, and I don't have the answers. You know, there are people who get paid to have the answers. But I mean, at some point, you have to start somewhere, right? And I think these are two places where we need to start.
Amen. What about you, Cal? Where do we go from here?
You know, I wish I could say I don't know how optimistic I am, to be perfectly honest. I think it's going to be a continuum in the conversation. I think there will be progress made from what's going on right now. But I think that's just going to be a part of the overall continuum that, you know, unfortunately, I think 50, 60 years from now, they'll still be having this conversation when the next time the world, you know, sees something. But at that point in time, people of color will be in a better place. And the revolution at that time will be a little bit different from what it is now, right? But it'll help progress us even more. Right. So I think it's just what do we focus on so that when that next time comes, we're even better prepared. I think the economy for us has a lot to do with it. Right. We got to see ourselves the way we want to be seen by others too. And I think that's a big part of it. I think, but the results of that, I think, ends in violence. Right? Because when you stop being scared of somebody, when you stop seeing them as the authority, right? And you know, we've all seen it. They go to punk you. You look at them in their face, and you be like, "I'll punch you in the fucking mouth."
Right.
It changes from a passive conversation to an aggressive conversation, and then once that aggression is ended, then people kind of fall back and be like, "Oh, well, I thought I could beat your ass, but I can't. So can we be friends now?" You know, unfortunately, I feel like history tells us that has to happen. And, you know, there'll be different iterations of how that happens over time until the explosion happens. but unfortunately, I think you end up getting it, right? I think you'll see a lot of Black people go out there and get their gun licenses. I'm encouraging people to go out there and get their gun licenses, right? Because I think when those numbers go up, the only time in history that the NRA spoke against gun violence was when the Black Panthers showed up, right? And they was like, yo, we're using the laws that have been put in place to arm ourselves, and we not scared of you, right? And then all of a sudden, even the NRA was like, oh, everybody can't have a gun, right? Because that equaled the playing field at that moment.
Sure.
Right? It wasn't a violent group of people by their nature. All they said, all the Black Panthers was saying was, we don't need you. We can feed our own communities. We can educate our own communities. We can circulate dollar in our own community. And then they were like, we got to figure that out. And they fought the Black Panthers. It wasn't like Black Panthers was like, we standing up for ourselves. And they was like, well, we need to show y'all that we are much more violent than you are and take all that away from you, right? And the more people of color that fight in the armed services, right? The more people of color who take their, Second Amendment right and go arm themselves, I think it ends up in a bloody mess. But at the end of that bloody mess, you'll have people turn around and look and say, it is what it is. I mean, I don't know how many of y'all know what's going on in Africa right now, but you go to South Africa and different parts of that continent where colonialism is over and the Africans have started taking their land back, you got white people speaking a whole different tune over there in the places. We don't know nothing else. We ain't never been no place else. And you got Black people saying, well, shit. Your people looked at my folks and said, we were saying we didn't know what was going to happen. It was go back to Belgium, look, right? So, and ultimately it's violent there, right? Unfortunately, however you look at it, it's Black people being very violent towards white people over there right now. But history says that we fight this out at the end of the day.
So, final thoughts from you guys. I know it's been a lot.
Man, we need more hours to discuss all.
Yeah, no doubt. Listen, I'm not averse to that. I'm just, I don't want to exhaust y'all, but
I appreciate you guys, man. I'm gonna say something that's people may think it's controversial, but to me, for all my studies, white and whiteness is something that's made up. It's a myth. So I really think that in a lot of these cases, there are two groups. There's white and non-white. And I think that's all it is. If you look at it like, I'm not trying to say anything bad about American people, but why do you have to be white? Be Italian American, be Irish American, be whatever. But if you look at the history of whiteness, it comes from people saying, I'm better than you because, right? And made up stereotypes and all that. And that's the history of our country.
Sure. Let's
look at that and everyone take a self-assessment and let's fix that. I think that, again, I just want solutions. I want real things. If police brutality is a problem, I think it is. If enough of us think it is, let's set up something in place so it doesn't happen anymore. And if any officer who acts like what we've seen on camera, if they get punished severely, it'll change people's behavior. But I think that part of it, one thing that I've noticed recently is I've been having a lot more conversations on this topic with people, and it's been wild how little people know about American history beyond like just the basics, and how they don't really critically think about what our country is and where we are right now. So man, I'm just looking forward to having more conversations and really trying to work at solutions that'll make this a better place to live for everybody, and especially for Black people who, from what I've seen my whole life are just, criminalized. Like our culture, everyone loves our culture, but you criminalize us. And man, again, it's not enough time to talk about it, but I appreciate you guys, man, and having us on here to talk about this tonight.
Thanks, Pat. Jock, what do you got?
I appreciate, like Pat said, I appreciate how you guys using the platform. I just think that's what we have to do. Just no matter how small you think your voice is, just speak out. Even if you can get across to one person, then you've made somewhat of a difference. I don't know if you guys have seen the new Chef stand-up that came out last night.
Yeah.
So I mean, he made a great point. Like they were saying, like, well, where are the celebrities? He's like, this is a people's movement. Sometimes you just want to sit back and let the people speak for themselves, let the people show you what the direction we should be going in. And like we were saying earlier with the younger kids, they know how to use social media. They know how to use the TikToks and the IGs and what have you. So sometimes maybe we as the older, now that when we're becoming the elder statesmen, maybe we take their lead now, we let them show us what they want from us and what we can do to help them. Because I mean, it's their future now. We're established. You guys have kids, and at some point, they're going to be the ones that they're going to be leading the world. So let them tell us what we need, what they need from us, and hopefully we can help them.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Cal, what about you?
Yeah, I feel the same, man. Like, but first, before we go, say I ain't seen Pat in so long. I did want to compliment you on those frames, those glasses you wearing are nice. I know you've always been a trendsetter, so
those are pretty fun.
I just wanted to compliment you on those.
Yeah, I can't see y'all without them.
But nah, this is dope, man. I really appreciate y'all for putting this together and thinking about, your brothers from way back when. As this topic came up, because I think it's incredibly important that we just continue the conversation, the dialogue, and we all gonna have different viewpoints, which I think is the backbone of what makes this country incredible in spite of, So, the fact that you guys have created this platform and brought us onto this platform to have a honest discussion. And have been open to hearing our viewpoints, have been open to going back and looking at your own history, and seeing how that plays out and how it affects it. I mean, I greatly appreciate that. I think that's ultimately how we're going to be able to break this curse, even if it takes another 100 years to do it, right? We don't get there unless we continue to have conversations, unless it continuously is in people's faces that this ain't right, man. People are people. And it is all lives matter, right? Like the point is that you looking at these black people like theirs don't. So I appreciate y'all for getting this conversation jumping off and keeping it going and wanting all of these different viewpoints, because I think that solves the problem. So
thanks. Ace, what do you got?
One, I'm just taken aback. I spoke on it during our last episode, how early childhood incidents have caused me to kind of step back with my own interactions growing up, interacting with other Black children. I might as well tell a story. My parents were part of a bowling league, one side of which was a Filipino American bowling league, the other side of which was a Black American bowling league. And there was this kid, Malik, whom I loved at the time. We were into wrestling. I'm 7 years old, Thundercats, Transformers. And then there was another group of boys, other Filipino Americans. And there was one day where, we were playing video games and the machine ate the quarter. The mom comes around because one of the boys asked for more money. Malik was with us, and she immediately turned her attention to Malik. And she just said right out, and I just remember her eyes and the resentment behind it. She just singled him out and called him a nigger. And as a 7-year-old kid, I kind of took a step back. I looked at Malik. I had no words because he was deeply affected by it. The mother, I don't even know her, but she looked at me and was like, let's go find your parents, get away from this child. He kind of walked away. The season went along, and I'd always look towards his way, and he'd always turn away. And that just deeply affected me, and kind of it's just something I've tucked away, because I recall like how much fun I had with him as a kid, and to see that I couldn't enjoy those moments with him beyond that incident affected me deeply. And it just, all these emotions have started flooding in, where I wish I could have said something. I wish, instead of taking a step back, kind of like step forward and say something, and say, wow, that doesn't feel right. And it wasn't at the time. So definitely need to have these kind of conversations to know more about what's now finally being talked about beyond what's readily available on Netflix now, because it's impacted my interactions as I grew up, and that's just like one incident that comes to mind. But yeah, I appreciate listening to your viewpoints and all of that, and we definitely have to have more of these conversations.
Go ahead, Maris.
First of all, I want to thank you guys for actually being gracious enough to come on our podcast, and it's adding a lot of value to discussions and subject matter that's actually happening within the last 2 weeks. My viewpoint on it, and the reason I'm doing this and supporting movements like this, is for my kids. I have 3, and my oldest is 10, my daughter's 6, and my little boy just turned 1. And we had a busy, and I told the guys in the other podcast, we had a busy weekend last weekend because it's my youngest son's birthday. I had facilitated a Zoom wedding in that same weekend. And then we had a little peaceful protest here in where I live in New Milford, New Jersey. And me and my wife decided to go. We made up our signs. And then she asked me, it's like, do you want to take Xavier, who's my oldest son? And I said no. Like I was like, I want to protect him from what's going on right now. I don't want him seeing anything on the television yet, because I don't think he's ready. And my wife was very wise, and she just said, you're not going to protect him from that forever. And it's better you do it now, because the opportunity is there for actual change to happen. And you want him to be a part of that. And I thought to myself, wow, that totally went over my head. Luckily, we have wives that knock us to our senses sometimes. And then when he went there, and, honestly, New Milford right now, when I got here 5 years ago, I thought was all white. And then when we got to the borough and saw multitudes of young people, mixed races everywhere, just supporting this movement, I was super moved. And my son was like, why are all these signs saying, Black Lives Matter, this, that, and the other thing? I told you, change is happening, and there's an inequality right now, son, that, you're too young to really understand, but I think it's my duty as your father to educate you on things that I didn't necessarily have experience with too much growing up, but I know that it was there. And I'm doing my part right now for you to step up and say, everyone's lives matter, including people that are different from you. And he doesn't, I when I talk to him about it right now, he doesn't understand it, but this year, and just to kind of segue off that, but to kind of bring it all back and tie it in a nice bow, hopefully, I had volunteered to coach the New Milford fourth grade basketball team, right? I volunteered to be an assistant coach. And there was two other fathers. One was Italian, the other one Irish, and head coach African American. And I looked at that as, wow, I didn't hear firsthand that, you know, basketball was a big thing here in New Milford. We were predominantly a football and baseball town. And it brought me back to when I was playing varsity for Hudson Catholic, and I was part of, you know, a very kind of a mixed pot of diversity on the basketball team. And when I saw that, I got really happy because I knew that he would be making friends that weren't, you know, that had a diverse background. And I think what I'm trying to say is that, you know, I'm really glad that this is happening now, because I think this is a propeller for change. And I really hope this doesn't fizzle out, because the reason we're doing this is so that they don't have to later, right? I want to help them. I want to help fight this fight now, so that it doesn't have to be their burden. But even though I know it probably is, because we're only going to last so long with this, right? And they have to be educated now to help continue that fight going forward. And I think that's what this ultimately means to me. And I think, to cap it off, we're all doing homeschooling here. They don't finish up till next week, but I had listened in this week on one of his classes, and at the beginning of Monday, they have a Google Classroom, and they're all able to change their profile pictures on there. And when I saw half of their profile pictures all had Black Lives Matter, and then when they were saying, "Would you guys learn over the weekend? Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter," and I was like, that is absolutely awesome, because the message is getting sent down to them, and hopefully it's not something that's fleeting, and something that sticks with them from their youth, and something that carries forward.
Thanks, Marisk. Yeah, so like I told you guys, the reason why we got this together was, you know, at least for me, the first part about it is, you know, Filipinos in America in general, the immigrant population in America, and I said it today, right? We espouse ourselves to white ideals, and we accept whiteness as excellence. We love Black excellence. Don't get us wrong. We love Michael Jordan's. We love Beyonce's as a culture, but we think that that's a minority of the Black culture, and it permeates through everything that our elders say and do. Right? We went to a school, right? Obviously, we all went to school together. They don't know about the Black excellence that you guys bring to the table, and I'm going to be honest with that, right? They think that that's a minority of Black America. And to me, that's a sad viewpoint for my people, because we clawed and we scratched and we fought to get where we are. For us to not acknowledge that there could be Black excellence in spite of hatred is silly, right? So like I said, we espouse that. And I want to make sure that people understand excellence. You know, to your point, Cal, earlier, excellence is there. That's in general a large part of that culture, of your culture, of our culture, right? We choose to focus on the small group that requires some help, but excellence is there and excellence exists. So I think that's the first part. So I wanted to try to break down a lot of, you know, my own family members' perceptions about, you know, who Black people are, what they're all about, besides what they see on television on NBA games. The second part, just like Marisk was saying, I'm sure all of us we grew up in Jersey City, right? So as we move up in the world, I think the first thought is to get out of the ghetto, right? And I felt extremely guilty about it. When we had the wherewithal, my wife and I, to move, I was extremely reticent to go anywhere besides Jersey. I love Jersey City dearly. It made me who I am. I've met guys like you, and it's molded me to the person that I am today. But I lose because I have a wife, and that's generally how it works. So when we were looking for houses, a lot of the real estate agents were pushing us towards East Hanover, Livingston, Verona, right? And we were like, absolutely not. You have to find us a multicultural area, because I want my son to grow up in an environment where he's going to deal what he's going to deal with every day is what he's going to deal with when he grows up in the future, right? Because let's be honest, it's not going to be homogenous in this country. He is going to have to deal with all races, creeds, and cultures. And if you don't get him growing up that way, he's never going to be prepared for it. So anyway, he loves basketball, and he's a great basketball player. So a lot of his best friends come from East Orange, come from West Orange, come from Newark, because they're in AAU teams, right? So it's the opposite thing here. They're like, what is this little Asian dude doing on this basketball team? Then he crosses them over. Then they're like, oh, okay, you're cool, right? So, and that's the great, and Pat, you can attest to this, right? And Maersk too. Basketball is a great equalizer of culture, right? You can bond over it regardless who you are, and it doesn't require anything. It's a hoop, it's a ball, that's all you need. So I think for me, the love that he has for the game that's translated to his friends, and they're 90% Black kids, right? So it's important for him to know that these types of struggles exist, because he doesn't see it. He just doesn't see it every day, because kids don't see color, right? They learn hatred, they learn love. So every day I want him to know, like, listen, just because you live in this bubble now doesn't mean that all of this pain, all of this suffering isn't going to exist in the outside world. You have to be prepared for it. So these conversations are super helpful. I think it's, for us to get these viewpoints that we don't see. And I'm ashamed, right? Yeah. We should have these conversations, guys. Mm-hmm. We should have these every week. We should go and do things together. It's a shame, Cal, that you're in Newark and I'm in West Orange, and this is the first time I've seen you in damn near 15 years, right? That's a shame. So I think I wanted to open up that line. I wanted to understand what it was about. I wanted to know what you guys are feeling right now, because it's important to me, because I was so pained, and Ace and I and Maersk and I were so pained when we saw what was going on, that I needed to understand what was coming from you guys so that I could have a reference point, so I could understand it better. And to your point, Pat, mobilize it in a way that's going to give us a solution. And again, I'm gonna point to my own culture, because I know my own culture. We stand on the sidelines all the time. It's easy for us, right? We're model minorities. We just sit in the sideline. So I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want my kids to be that way anymore. I want to understand what the struggle is, because your struggle is our struggle. We're all minorities in this country. So again, like I said, I appreciate you guys volunteering. I was so, I didn't want to reach out first, because I didn't want to make it feel like, oh, Jet's trying to just get some Black people on the podcast. So when Pat reached out, I was super happy, and I was extremely, blessed and privileged to have you guys kind of volunteer. So again, thank you for spending your time. And like I said, this doesn't have to be the last one, and it doesn't have to be this deep. We can just watch some basketball games and whatnot and talk through it or whatever, review some, you know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't have to be this deep, but I think it was an important conversation to have. And I appreciate y'all. So
thanks for having us, man.
All right, guys.
Yeah, thanks, man. I love y'all, man.
Love you guys.
Love. Same here. Go to bed before my wife kills me.
Yeah, no doubt.
Ready. But yo, we could talk basketball. I got my one nephew plays for Wichita State.
Oh.
My other little cousin plays for the 76ers.
Nice.
Oh,
y'all want to
okay.
talk some basketball shit? Let's go.
do it. Let's do it. I'm down. All right, guys. Have a good night.
All right, fellas.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
Peace.
Peace.